Chris Campbell is doing the presentation. Good morning, Chair, and thanks for the opportunity. That's the format in which I'm going to present today, the BUSA position. And I want to start with the opening remarks, and from the onset, indicate that, of course, BUSA, as the Apex Business Organization, are aligned with the motives for such all-encompassing legislation. And of course, with the attempts for us to try to meet the prescripts of Section 217 of our Constitution in all of its subsections. But, we would also hasten to say that in the past, and lessons learned, which we want to improve on, is least cost decisions in contradiction with what's cost effective, excessive pricing, overly competitive competition and that kind of behavior, whether that's destructive or constructive. And, there are several other key questions around how do we differentiate between what should be treated more strategically and what should be treated as commodity procurement processes. On the questions of fairness, and I just want to talk about the document, the bill itself, reflects insufficient evidence of how we've taken into account the learnings and the advice from the Zondo Commission. And of course, there's still a gap where we could deliberately insert incentivized whistleblowing, because we need quick reaction, real time, to be dependent on another process elsewhere. We've seen how the perpetrators tend to get away, get out of the country. To use the expression, they get out of Dodge very quickly. So, and then the other one is the standalone triple PFA, which we've always had problems with that. And the fact of the matter is, right now, in Chapter 4, which seems to be a really focal point of most of the discussions, there is still a deficiencies in whether it constitutes a framework, but there are other concerns we'd like to ventilate. So if we can move to the next slide. And I'm cutting to the chase, Chair. We're advocating for this public procurement bill to be referred back to the NEDLAC process, to strengthen it, so that when we get it signed into law, we can move forward. There are too many pitfalls that one can see. We will immediately find ourselves stymied and will stall. Also, if it does get signed off and we embark on regulation setting, then we are once more stuck with the situation of trying to convert a donkey into a prize-winning racehorse. No offense to donkeys, of course. Why am I saying, and why are we advocating for that? In the NEDLAC report, it's very clear there's been many areas of disagreement between the social partners. Most often, business and labor were aligned and in agreement, and most often, government led by the National Treasury not. We would also contend that it does not, whereas it's meant to consolidate the fragmented legislation, there's still many gaps which haven't been addressed, which are sitting in the PFMA, MFMA, which not of necessity belong in regulation. They could be, if you are trying to do something all-encompassing. And this is just an effort on our part, along with others, and this is not a singular view. There are experts in procurement law, global procurement practice, construction industry, and even public sector entities, I would hasten to add, whose inputs have been dismissed in this process, despite, and I heard your comment about a 10-year process, but I will share more in the next slide. Please, next one. So I'm not going to read verbatim, but I want to just maybe under the third bullet, share with you the fact that a NEDLAC process for this bill was 6 months, a generous 6-month period for social partners to consider it even at that time, it did not appear that there was much research that had gone into it on how are we actually going to get this right as groundbreaking procurement. And the contrary, though, was that the last consultation had ended in 2020. So for 2 years, National Treasury, through the Office of the Chief Procurement Officer, had this in their possession, and surely we could have done better. And so we did feel, but shortchanged in the NEDLAC process. Then what's becoming clear is that we seem to be rushing this bill to address one factor, and importantly so, we would not deny, and that is, how do we give credence to preferential procurement as in section 2173, so that we meet the prescripts of 2172. But I think there are other pitfalls which we need to take stock of, because they too will make us not maximize and optimize the public spend. And another risk that we have is that there appears to be, again, questions around consultation, not only the NEDLAC and the newer version of the public procurement of the preferential chapter 4, preferential procurement section, but also in the consultation where as much as 64% of input invited to comment to the National Assembly apparently and seemingly had not been incorporated or considered. And we're aware of existing legislation which on that same grounds has caused, even after the president has signed the bill off, caused the Constitution Court to nullify it, and everybody goes back to the drawing board. So if you can go to the next slide, please. I've ventilated a bit more on chapter 4. I'm not going to dwell on it because I think there's a real risk that we may find this session only about chapter 4, and there's enough issues around what we need to reconsider. But what is key there is the overlap in chapter 4 and the marginalization of the BBBE Act, which if we allow ministers the opportunity to willfully and willy-nilly decide when it should be included and when not, then that begs the question on whether we're serious about that. And we also are threatening the livelihoods of those beneficiaries of such broad basing. We've seen evidence of entities putting out strange requirements around ownership, and furthermore, if we look at what is the real question and why in the public domain, and especially public entities, are they questioning the BBBE in its current form and its successes, simply because we are not taking stock of what is the ills that are causing a bad impression to what is a well-intended and successful in the construction industry. For example, there is evidence from the scorecards and the reports that have been tabled to government of its successes in all its dimensions, the skills development, the enterprise and supplier development, which I do not believe we would want to lose or reverse. Next slide, please. I did mention the environmental legislation, the Zondo Commission and the lessons learned that should have been here. Also, earlier on, why we believe incentivized whistleblowing should have been deliberately put in this bill. There's precedent for that. It exists in the environmental legislation. And once again, if we look at the time delays, just from the findings in the Zondo Commission and state capture era, how many are still not where they should rightfully be after infringing and breaking the laws of this country, it makes it even more imperative that we have a more online, on-tap, real-time opportunity and system for doing so. And then I also want to say that the In the session the other day, listening in and wonderful word, expatiated version of the chapter 4, we've done research. We've also compared with others who've looked at it similarly, and it's clear that either we are at pains of playing with words and defining to what extent an expatiation constitutes something new, or whether it's slightly enriching. We would contend that it's too new not to have been reconsidered, at least at the NEDLAC review process.
As you know, you're at almost 10.5 minutes. Thanks.
Yes, I'm wrapping up now. Thank you very much. I do have, so if I can go to the next slide. A very important point I'd like to ventilate here is that this bill, it says patently procurement. We spend 4.5, our GDP is 4.5 trillion. Our infrastructure asset spend over the last, say, a 20-year average has been 750 billion. And yet we relegate the mention of infrastructure, just as one example, to 2 lines in this bill, which that cannot be. We don't seem to be serious about how do we maximize the public spend in a country that's rapidly running short of money. And I'm not going to dwell on the last point. If you can go to the next slide. The urgency, of course, we understand, but sometimes urgency can make you just go all the way, be forced to go all the way back. And we would like to say that it would be counterproductive to hope that by accelerating this floor piece of legislation, and even, no disrespect, Chair, the time that it's taken is we should take the opportunity to get it right so we can move forward. Next slide. And, I think just from business as social partners, we're hopeful that all of the inputs will be deemed to be constructive, taken stock of. Let us get better bang for our buck, because at the end of the day, it's exactly what we need as a country and as a society. Thank you, Chair.